Before I moved into the house on Willoughby Lane, I never had given the slightest thought to paranormal activities, and had always dismissed it with a wave of the hand and an offhand comment of how such things are scientifically impossible. However, all that changed a few years ago when myself and my newly acquired husband decided to buy an old farmhouse in upstate New York. The real estate agent, while giving us a tour of the home, had in fact related some disturbing information to us. She told us about 20 years ago, a young woman who had lived there with her 2 sons and her father, who apparently was an alcoholic as well as an abusive parent, had gone missing. Her remains had never been found. There had been almost certain proof that her father had murdered her, and was shortly thereafter tried and sentenced to 10 years in prison, where he had almost died. I thought nothing of this, except for the fact that one day I might be gardening and dig up a little bit more than dirt. However, this did not stop us from buying the home, which was gorgeous, with green shutters, a post and beam barn which was in good repair, and a drive that was lined in grand old maple trees. But my friend, who was indeed a strong believer in the supernatural, strongly advised us that there might be what she called restless spirits residing in the home. Again, me being convinced there was no such thing, did not take her warning seriously. After a long day of moving all of our possessions into a newly bought home, I'd fallen asleep in what was soon to be the living room. The movers had helped me bring in our couch, as well as an old rocking chair we had found in the barn. Both my husband and I thought we were able to save the old thing, which was made of oak and not damaged, except for the fact that the seat itself was no longer there. I was snoring away on the couch when I awoke, drowsily, to a consistent creaking. My husband, who was at work, and the movers, who had long since gone home, were absent, leaving me alone in the home. As I looked around, I noticed that the rocking chair was moving, as if someone was in it. Needless to say, I was incredibly scared, and proceeded to throw a book I had been reading at the chair, or running out of the home. As the weeks passed, more and more of these types of things would happen, all ending with me rather frightened. Things would disappear and reappear without notice, some of which would never be there in the first place. Some of these items consisted of a wide collection of women's jewelry that I occasionally would find in what we found out later used to be a bedroom. Though we converted it into a study, I would hear knockings. Doors would open and shut for no apparent reason. We would occasionally hear the faint creaking of the rocking chair, even though I had insisted it be placed back in the barn. Occasionally, I would hear hushed voices and see flashes of what appeared to be figures out of the corner of my eye. This behavior increased as time passed, till I was starting to get used to it. I even admit to talking with the spirit whenever I was alone in the home. I would always be rewarded with an abrupt cease in all abnormal activity. On the evening of the housewarming party me and my husband were holding, one of my friends came to me in a state of anxiety. They said that they had been in the basement when they saw a woman standing there, staring at them, then turning and vanishing. Myself and a few others hurried down to the basement, where we looked all over, trying to find the woman. What we did find was a hidden cupboard with what was later confirmed to be the remains of Sue Hoover, the woman who disappeared nearly 20 years ago. After this finding, the noises and sightings immediately stopped, and we have yet to hear the slightly disturbing creak of the old rocking chair which we eventually moved back into the home and repaired. However, I will never forget my experiences that year, and never again doubt the existence of spirits in the physical world again. I'm a great fan of your site, and I've submitted some of my own stories. The other day, I remembered an experience my sister Christy had many years ago. Although I was not a direct witness to this, I was there when she came home in hysterics. She was in such a state that we all thought she was attacked, and we could not get any sense out of her. The story goes like this. Christy had been walking home from a friend's house down a long lane called Langley Lane. On the right-hand side of this lane, there was a field which was used for cattle from a local farm. There was also a book with a large tree hanging over it. The summer before, I think this happened later in the year, as it was quite dark early, a young man had hanged himself from this tree during a fit of depression. I recall that other people have hanged themselves there too, at least one other one that I know of. I think I was about 16 at the time. I'm now 36, and Christy would have been about 11. Anywho, myself and my brother were sat in the house one evening, and that's when we heard Christy loudly banging on the front door to be let in. She was crying hysterically and was trying to talk but couldn't. She was obviously very distressed, and we thought that she had been attacked. When she eventually did calm down, which was sometime later that evening, she told me what had happened. She said that she was walking down Langley Lane when she looked over at the tree and saw a figure hanging from it. She said that the figure was glowing white and had a bend in its neck, like its neck had been broken. She then proceeded to run all the way home, which was a distance of about a quarter of a mile. She did not want to tell her brother, as she thought he would not believe her. Having had experiences myself, I am open-minded and certainly don't feel like she made it up. She has always stood by her story. I was looking at your haunted places in Houston, Texas. I grew up there. I came across the Jefferson Davis Hospital, and it reminded me of something. Once after a good night of hanging out, a group of friends and I decided to go and check it out. When we got there, I immediately felt unwanted. My skin crawled with fear. I kept telling everyone that we were not welcome there. We were only equipped with several lighters, so the shadows were unbelievable. We kept hearing people talk, thinking it was someone else in the hospital. Someone would call out, but nobody would answer. I kept feeling something touch my back, thinking it was my boyfriend. I turned around, but he was a couple of feet away from me. The entire time I was there, I kept telling him that we needed to leave. My friends got annoyed with me, so we decided to leave. As we were leaving the building, I was holding my boyfriend's hand, and something shoved me. I fell so hard that I twisted my ankle. It was swollen for weeks, and my doctor couldn't tell me why. Nothing was broken. It finally healed after 6 months. I still have problems with my ankle to this day. I have an experience that I would like to submit to the website. I've attached it below. After my encounter one late night in August with my sister, I found out that we'd always been around ghosts. My family has moved 5 times, and in every place, there had been at least one ghost there with us. When I lived in Texas, I moved from Houston to San Antonio. In that move, a ghost that we'd had for a year followed us to our new apartment. After living there for about a year, we discovered a new ghost. This one would hold the bathroom doors closed and knock over items we had on display. The event that completely changed my view of the paranormal happened in August of 2001. It was the early hours of the morning, about 4 a.m., and for some reason, I couldn't sleep. My older sister was on her computer, and she found a bunch of old music files she had downloaded for her history of rock class. Then she came across a Britney Spears parody song, downloaded from a radio station's website. The song itself was actually an E-clip, about 30 to 40 seconds long. We played it, and for some reason the file was corrupt. The words were garbled, playing in a slow, deep, incomprehensible voice. I had chills listening to it play, and when I looked at the counter, it had been playing for over a minute. My sister finally turned it off. She was just as spooked as I was. We moved on, laughing about the look on each other's face. Then about 5 minutes later, we heard 3 soft, solid pounds in the back wall in the far back of the apartment. Neither one of us said a word. We just listened, trying to explain away in our minds. We lived on the 2nd floor and shared only one wall, and that was not it. Another couple seconds passed by, and the banging jumped to the one long wall we shared, still towards the back of the apartment, but getting closer. We couldn't help but to stare at each other. After that one, we finally decided to ask others if she'd heard that. Of course we heard the same thing, and not a minute later, the banging jumped to the room next to us, on the same wall. 3 solid bangs escalating in amplitude. My heart was racing, waiting for the next set, afraid of where it would jump next. A couple of minutes passed, and just as it began to calm down, and blame the banging on the maintenance worker that we shared the wall with, the banging suddenly jumped forward to the wall behind the computer. I looked above me to see the ceiling light shaking. Moments later, the banging shot across the room to the balcony. It sounded as if the entire wall was pounded on with one giant fist. 3 echoing pounds later, everything stopped. I checked the sliding doors, and they were locked, thankfully. We both ran into my mother's room, and somehow she was still sleeping. She hadn't heard a thing. That was something I never understood. My baby brother was in the same room with her, door closed, and he heard a soft rumble, and my mother heard nothing. After that experience, I've always been a little on edge. I always think about what would have happened if I'd left the sliding doors unlocked that night, and what the thing was trying to get in. One thing I know for sure is that my ghost from Houston left that night, and the one already there seemed to get more active. Everyone started to hear their name being called, even when no one was around. Luckily, no one ever attempted to communicate with whatever it was. As a matter of fact, we rarely began to answer unless we saw the person who was calling us. 2 years later, after I finished high school, we moved to Iowa when I was accepted to college, and so far, we have not had any strange paranormal occurrences. "8 years ago, myself, my husband, and my brother lived at this home. We were told by the neighbor that no one ever lasts, and we didn't either. Not because of the haunting, but because we needed to come back to Massachusetts for family reasons. Anyway, we lived in this house for 9 months. We were told the AC was broken, and in the Valley of Folsom it gets very hot, but not in our living room. It was always very cool in that part of the home. On one occasion, I was in the bathroom, and after my shower, I was looking towards the mirror, and I saw an orange blur over my shoulder. I turned to look, but it wasn't there. It looked as though it was a face, and it would have been standing at the right height, to where a head would be on a grown man. After a few weeks, I mentioned it to my brother and my husband, and my brother relayed a story about one night, while sound asleep, he was awoken by a very large thud on his bed. He said it felt like a bowling ball had landed on the bed, like someone sat down. He said he was too scared to look, so he fell back to sleep. After a few more months, we found out that the house used to belong to the town doctor that treated inmates from the Folsom prison back in the 1800s. After putting all the info together, we realized we were living in a haunted home. I was hoping to see other stories about the house on this website, but maybe my story will start to flow. When I was 11, my father died from a heart attack in our home. Because of the trauma on my little sister, she witnessed people trying to resuscitate him. Our mother decided to move. We ended up moving just a little bit further down the road, into an older house that had been built in the early 70s. The owner of the house also died in the house many years before. It was a 2-story house, and the bottom level was made of cinder block. I'm guessing because of this, it was the reason that it was always cold downstairs. Luck or unluck would have it that the bottom level would be mine and my sister's rooms. It always was a creepy feeling downstairs. It always felt like you were being watched, but I always just chalked it up to an overactive imagination. Me and my sister both felt uncomfortable in the downstairs area. It consisted of our 2 rooms, a laundry room, and a cellar. One morning, when I was 14, I was standing in front of my dresser and putting on my makeup. Then, I heard a voice come up to my right ear and whisper my name. The fact that on my right side was a wall really freaked me out. I ran upstairs and asked my mom had she called for me. She told me that she had not. I hated sleeping in that room from that time on, and always tried to sleep with the light on, even though it drove my mom nuts. My sister had a similar experience. I was staying at my friend's house one night, and my sister went upstairs to make sure the door leading outside was closed. She said that as she went to place her foot on the bottom step, she said something came up to her and whispered my name. She said that she also experienced things being thrown in the dark when there was no one to throw them, such as a sock. My mom lives there by herself now, and as far as I know, she has never had anything odd happen to her. But whenever I visit, she knows that I will not sleep in the lower bedrooms. I still feel odd in the lower level, but not as bad as I used to. If anyone has any thoughts or suggestions on this, I would love to hear it. Feel free to email me. Hi, I'm 40 years old, and this story is very true. When my brother, sister, and I were young, about 7, 8, or 9, maybe even younger, we used to see what we would call the brown man. He was brown from head to toe. We came to the conclusion he was a shadow spirit, but with a literal brown look, not tucking skin, but visibly brown. His hat, his face, his clothes, and his shoes were all brown, different shades, but all brown. We would see him periodically and take off running when we did, but our parents never would see him. We'd walk from the kitchen and turn the corner, and he'd just be standing there. Sometimes we'd hear the toilet set drop, just little things. After after we grew up. My sister was about 25 when she had her first child. She had a girl. My sister's daughter used to what we thought talk to herself when she was about 2 or 3 years old, and my sister decided it was time to ask her who she was talking to, and her daughter told her, Mr. Burgess. This went on for some time. She would play, have tea parties, and sing with him just about every time she was in my parents' home. Well, one day, my niece asked my sister why Mr. Burgess wore brown all the time. Needless to say, that really shook us up because we thought we saw the brown man. We would tease each other and say, "The brown man's behind you," and get a real kick out of it. I've since had 3 children, and my sister another daughter, but they've never come in contact or ever seen the brown man. Hey, I'm the YouTube man. And here's the YouTube man. Hey guys, it's PhantomOfDarkness, and I really encourage you to actually comment, share this video, and leave a like. I hate asking, but with the algorithm the way it is, it helps push the younger channels past the algorithm. I don't know what I mean by younger, but you guys exactly will understand my method. Okay, I'm gonna leave. Guys, it's nice to hear from you again. I love you. I just want to hear your comments, which stories you like, and I'll see you in the next video. Love you. I know this is a late upload, but I hope you enjoy it.